victims of conservative indoctrination are starting to reject homeschooling and sending their kids to public school. So this is an interesting story, a report from the Washington Post. Now, they profiled a couple of former hardcore evangelical Christians who were, in fact, homeschooled. So now they note that this couple and others that they know have been moving their children away from the things that they experienced through this homeschooling, which they called abusive and indoctrination. In fact, the couple had been taught growing up that public schools were demonic indoctrination camps aimed at destroying Christian families, which is hilarious because it's one of those, I don't know, I would say projection, but really it's one of those things where it's like every accusation is in confession. And when they accuse, public schools of indoctrinating children, well, that's what you're doing. You're doing the indoctrination. Now, after a crisis of faith, this couple, the Beals, the Beall family, decided to send their 6-year-old daughter to an elementary school, a public elementary school near their Virginia home. And they do not regret it. In fact, they think that it was one of the best decisions that they have made and have begun thinking about some of the educational opportunities that they had missed out by being homeschooled by their parents. So now, Aaron Beall told the Washington Post, quote, "People who think the public schools are indoctrinating don't know what indoctrination is. We were indoctrinated." So I think that's really important. That's a very important statement for the times that we're living in. Very, very timely. Okay? Because right now we're having a conversation, with the right wing, who is screaming right now about public schools. They're indoctrinating the kids. The culture is indoctrinating the children. They're turning them into the trans. They're turning them into the gay. We've got to do something about it. It's indoctrination. No, that's what you're doing. You're doing the indoctrination. Literally, the ones complaining and crying the most about it are the ones who are actually engaging in it. So, in fact, Aaron says, quote, "It's not even comparable." So, real indoctrination versus the fake, nonsense, BS, so-called indoctrination of basically just admitting that trans and gay people exist and shouldn't be murdered and should be allowed to live their lives. Yeah. So anyway, now the Beals had their first crisis of faith that actually involved the discipline of their children. So just to show you kind of their evolution into detail, the steps here, and I think evolution is a pretty good term to use because, a lot of fundamentalist homeschooled Christians don't actually believe in evolution and teach against it. But in this case, this is an evolution not of just faith, but also of thought and of practice. And so I think it's really important to point this out. It started with what they were taught, what they were told on how to discipline their children, and the sort of discipline that they had received when they were children. So now they were taught essentially to physically assault their children. And they had a book, a manual. This book was To Train Up a Child, made by homeschooling authors Michael and Debbie Pearl. So this is the Pearl method. So part of the Pearl method includes or involves taking a switch and using it on literal babies. Yeah. So let's get into the details, right? So this is an actual quote from one of the editions of that book. And by the way, this has been through many different changes, many different editions, because one of the things the Pearls like to use is, "You're taking my quote out of context." So this is from the 17th edition, and I don't know exactly what edition that they're up to now, but let me give you a quote here from that. "At 5 months, she was too unknowing to be punished for disobedience, but for her own good and our peace of mind, we attempted to train her not to climb the stairs by coordinating the voice command of no, with little spats on her bare legs. The switch was a 12 once long, 1/8 inch diameter sprig from a willow tree. So basically, she doesn't quite understand it, but it doesn't matter. She climbs the stairs. You get the switch. Oh, okay. Well, now the book goes on to, describe some of the other situations in which you would use your discipline. For example, for babies that cannot sleep or refuse to sleep, they also get the switch. Quote, but what about the grouchy child who would rather complain than sleep? Get tough. Be firm with him. Never put him down. And then for some reason reverse your position, allowing him to get up. For your reputation with the child, you must follow through. He may not be able to sleep, but he can be trained to lie there quietly. He will very quickly come to know that any time he is laid down, there is no alternative but to stay put. To get up is to be on the firing line and get switched back down. So yeah, baby can't sleep, gets the switch. What about a 7-month-old that happens to be screaming? Well, you're not going to be surprised to know that they also get the switch. Quote, this is from the book from allegedly a 9-year-old. If he is old enough to pitch a fit, he is old enough to be spanked. Well, if you're looking at indoctrination, then this 9-year-old who said that, that would be, an example of somebody being indoctrination. Hey, I was beaten as a child. I was getting the switch. So guess what? You're a 7-month-old and you're screaming too loud? Well, guess what? You're going to get the switch too. Wow. Wait a minute. What about another one? Here's another situation that was in this book. If you're babysitting a 15-month-old, if you're babysitting, again, not your child, and you brought a toy that this child does not want to play with, what happens? Oh, you guessed it. He gets a switch. Quote, after about 10 acts of stubborn defiance, followed by 10 switchings, he surrendered his will to one higher than himself. In rolling the wheel, he did what every accountable human being must do. He humbled himself before the highest and admitted that his interests are not paramount. After one begrudged roll, my wife turned to other chores. So yeah, kid doesn't play with the toy that you brought him, that doesn't have any interest in it. Doesn't matter. Your interests are not paramount at all. You go play with this toy that you don't want to play with, you get the switch. This couple, I don't think it's too far to go out and say that this couple literally wrote the book on child abuse. Just saying. Just saying. Now, that said, the couple, the Bealls, they didn't want to constantly abuse their children. So they decided, we're not going to do it. We're going to skip that. Quote, when it came time for me to hit my kids, that was the first independent thought I remember having. This can't be right. I think I'll just skip this part. So I can see it now from The Simpsons, the independent thought alarm. Can't have that. That's probably what the church was saying.
Can't let that happen.
The independent thoughts, no. No, you must beat your children. You must put the fear of God in them. Well, actually, it would be the fear of the parent, which is what they're trying to do. But let's be clear, though. Fear is not the same as respect. If you want your children to respect you, you do not have to resort to physical violence in order to do it. Again, those are two different things. In fact, fear often leads to a lack of respect from your children. And you have to learn how to earn that respect and gain that respect. And not use it through the application of essentially what is violence. Anyway, so now, Aaron Beall said that, hey, I'm having these thoughts, right? And I'm getting these independent thoughts that are different from how I was brought up, and it's kind of disorienting. So anybody who's, by the way, like in the process of waking up or becoming woke, right? In this case, I think it's an applicable word. Um, there's a disconnect there. There's some cognitive dissonance that goes along, and that can be very, very uncomfortable for people. But the Beals, I got to give them a lot of credit because they had to work through that and didn't just fall back into their old patterns, their old routines. They decided that, yes, this is very uncomfortable, and we're going to continue to meet this discomfort head on and continue to start questioning things. And I absolutely love that. Now, Aaron said that, quote, it's like having the rug pulled out from under your feet. All of reality is kind of up for grabs. Now, all that questioning led to an eventual loss of faith, and that caused his wife, in turn, Christina Beall, to begin questioning her biblical literalism and patriarchal values that had been in childhood instilled within her. Now, she ended up keeping her religious faith, but losing and basically ejecting the rest, which is totally fine. If you have faith in something, whether, a god, a deity, it doesn't really matter what you believe personally, as long as you're not using it to harm other people. In fact, I think that if you have a faith, you should be using it to help other people, not harm them. Now, that said, there was a little bit of friction there at first. Christina recalled thinking, this is a guy I've been married to for 8 years. I know him. I know his heart. I know what kind of parent he wants to be to our kids. And, for people who are breaking out of that religion, there's obviously going to be a lot of gossip. There's going to be a lot of, the smaller the town, the more spicy the gossip, right? So I'm pretty sure that there were people, members of the church, members of the family, clergy that see this, that saw Aaron's lack of faith, and they found it disturbing, right? And they decided to say, well, this guy obviously just wants to be a sinner. Duh. But she said this, quote, or she said that she wasn't buying this answer and said, quote, these easy answers of, oh, you're just not a Christian anymore, you just want to sin, didn't work anymore on her. So, again, they broke out of this homeschooled, fundamentalism. And while, again, Christina retains her values, or not values, sorry, retains her religious beliefs, Aaron doesn't, but they're still a family. And they still have shared values and how they raise their children and how they relate to each other, which, again, is perfectly fine. And you can have a wonderful, fulfilling relationship in that. Now, ironically, again, this is what happens when people get woke. They realize that the stuff they've been taught all their lives was crap. They don't have to believe in all these outdated, sometimes horrific notions. And it's not just the Beals. Beals are just one example. They say that they know of many homeschooling families that have drifted away from the religious dogma that have been imposed or on them, that they had been, wait for it, indoctrinated into. They woke up. They became the woke. They realized that not only that they were being abused by this very system, but they were also being turned into abusers themselves, abusing that next generation. And they didn't want to be a part of that. And by the way, that system is set up to self-perpetuate. The abused often in the next incarnation become the abusers, and then abuse the next generation, which then becomes the abusers, and on and on and it goes, right? And you have to, at some point, break that cycle if you want to end that abuse. And that's what happened here. The Beals have broken that cycle. They have ended that abuse. Now, as far as Christina, she said this about the system, quote, it is set up to hide the abuse, to make the victims of abuse invisible, and to strip them of any capability of getting help, and not just in a physical way. Now, in a lot of these, cults, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fears of being ostracized, removed from the group, losing your connections with, your friends and neighbors. There are people that have experienced things like having a trans child that has come out as openly trans and losing all of their community connections. Their neighbors who were perhaps once nice people to them becoming hateful bigots. Well, not maybe not becoming, but showing who they really are, showing what they've always been. Now that you are part of that group, you know what I'm saying? The mask comes off, I should say. And so you do see this happen, and there's understandably a lot of fear in breaking away from these dogmatic movements where there are people that are very much indoctrinated into that lifestyle and into those belief systems and really do actually think, no, you don't understand. Atheists are the devil. Agnostics are the devil. Muslims are the devil. They're all terrible people. The groomers are coming for your children. They're coming to indoctrinate your children when really they are the victims of said indoctrination, of a different kind of indoctrination, of the religious variety. So she said, quote, "At some point, you become so mentally imprisoned, you don't even realize you need help." And that is powerful. That is very powerful. And it's true. It's so incredibly true. I'm glad that they were able to break out. And I'm glad that they were able to actually question the indoctrination that they had been exposed to, the abuse that they had been exposed to. Now, a year after their daughter had started first grade, the couple decided to enroll their 3 other school-age children to public schools as well. And even their older daughter, their second, this is a second grader, right? Now to be, soon to be third grader. She actually wondered what it might have been like had the parents had the same opportunities to go to a public school instead of, again, being brought up in this very Christian, right-wing, patriarchal homeschool movement. She said, quote, "You should have just asked to go to school. It affects your whole life." I mean, yes, that's the simple answer. But as Christina said before, this kind of abuse becomes so normalized that you don't even know you're being abused. So how do you know to break out when all of this is just normal? And that's the result of indoctrination. That's how you know. And yet there are people out there, and I've covered plenty of these schools, who think, no, it's the gay community, it's the trans community, it's drag queens that are out there that are doing the indoctrination. They're indoctrinating children to become gay. No, that's not what's happening. You can't indoctrinate someone into that kind of life. It's just not, it's not a thing. It's not real. And actually, it's the opposite. The people that are screaming indoctrination the most are the ones who are doing it. Every accusation is a confession. What people are trying to do outside of these, again, I'm not saying all religion, but the hardcore right-wing conservative, Christianity, the Christian nationalism that is, full of people who are the proponents of, we've got to stop the groomers. We've got to stop the indoctrination. No, we've got to stop you guys and free people. Free people more like the Beals, right? In that process, so that they are like the Beals and others in that that have been profiled, are now free, are now, with facts and reality.